What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Turn the Jets podcast. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Monday afternoon here. We are, one preseason game down. Again, my full recap was on the Badlands Network with Connor and Joe, posted on Saturday. So if you missed that, make sure to check that out. Connor's joining us today. I believe second time on the pod, Out of Darkness, Aaron Rodgers biography, or coming out on August 20th. Pre-release is now available. Had to have Ian on. A lot of good content to come out of the book. Ian, how are we doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Will.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate taking some time. Obviously, I think anyone that's kind of watched Aaron Rodgers the last 20 years, specifically probably the last 3 or 4, where he's been a lot more vocal about a lot of different things in his life and a lot of things going on in the world. Just talk to me a little bit about what it was like writing this book. I remember we talked last summer and you were really excited to kind of dive into this project. What was the project like overall? And we obviously can get in kind of more of the specifics of the book.
Well, initially, Will, I was actually under contract to write a biography of LeBron James, and another LeBron book came out. I thought there probably would be some LeBron James fatigue. And around the same time, Aaron got traded into my backyard, our backyard. And I thought this is probably the most prominent American male athlete who has not had a defining biography written about him. He's obviously the most polarizing player in the NFL. And now he is the anointed savior of the New York Jets. And the last time the Jets were in the Super Bowl, I was 4 years old. So I can only remember flickering black and white images on my uncle's TV in Staten Island. I don't really remember the game. And so now I'm about to turn 60 years old in a couple of weeks. And it would be nice to see the Jets back in the Super Bowl, certainly. And I think Rodgers, if healthy, gives him a realistic chance to do that. But yeah, I decided that it would be a better idea to put off LeBron for maybe down the road and try to write the definitive profile of Aaron Rodgers' career and life. And hopefully I pulled it off.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into it. I'm not a huge reader. Anyone that listens to the podcast knows reading is not my forte. I do plan on reading this, and obviously it's very relevant to my day to day as well. There was a bunch of different things I want to kind of get to with this book, but I want to kind of start with something that was kind of unexpected that I didn't honestly expect to see. Some of the stuff with Aaron Rodgers' family has been one of these things that got talked about a lot for like this very short period of time with his dating life and his brother on The Bachelor and all that stuff. There's a couple of moving things, and I guess the story you had in there, I saw some quotes from, about him reconnecting with his dad, most specifically. That to me was kind of one of the most jarring things that I saw just in the initial quotes. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about that? Because I think that's something that, again, we've talked so much about the vaccine and Rodgers on the field and like all this different stuff, but his family was this big talking point for so long in Green Bay, and now it seems like things are kind of trending back in the right direction. I would say.
Yeah, hopefully, obviously, just as a parent, and I think everybody who knows him would love to see him get back together with his family. I think the road to reconciliation starts with his father, and that's what happened last summer, right before Jets training camp. He was playing golf in Lake Tahoe, and the estrangement really started late in 2014. So we're talking almost 9 years of not talking to his parents, to his two brothers, and to other relatives as well, and a couple of friends who were close to him. So he's playing in that celebrity golf tournament at Lake Tahoe. His father decides to get a ticket and walk with the crowd and just hope against hope that there might be a moment where the two of them come together. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. And I think Aaron was playing the ninth hole and heading to 10, and he happened to see his father in the gallery. And he thought to himself, should I act like I didn't see him? Should I act like I'm on my phone and ignore him? Or should I go over and give him a hug? And he decided to do that. And Ed Rodgers, his father, had actually lost sight of him for a minute and sort of turned around. And all of a sudden, there's his son, who he hasn't spoken to and hasn't seen in almost 9 years, looking right at him from about 15, 20 feet away. And Ed said, I froze because it's been so long since I've seen him. And Aaron, they came together for a hug, and they said they loved each other. It was an emotional moment. It was brief. Aaron then went back to finish the rest of his golf round. But they both spoke to me on the record about how meaningful that moment was. And Aaron said, I do want a relationship with my father. So He has not said those words about any family member in a long time. And I hope that it does lead somewhere. I think it was the first baby step towards a reconciliation. I think it will definitely, if it happens, hopefully it will start with the father. And then anything else that would happen after that would unfold organically, I think. And then we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, no, it was just something that stood out a lot, and some of the stuff I'd seen, I thought I found it quite interesting. One of the, I guess we'll hit on one of the other heavier topics, quote unquote, before some of the football stuff. But obviously the immunization versus vaccinated thing, and I try really hard not to get into too much of that on this and stuff like that. But it was obviously a huge deal when Rodgers, because he was such a high profile person, and between him and Brady, it was two guys there was a lot of questions around what was going on in terms of their vaccine status and all that stuff. Um, Again, nothing opinionated. This is not anybody's opinion politically, so no one coming on either of me or Ian's mentions on that. But it seemed like from reading some of the blurbs that he kind of regretted using some of the terminology immunized and things like that. You want to talk a little bit about that, because I saw that this morning. I was like, wow, I did not expect to see a quote from Rodgers saying he regretted anything in his life, let alone that.
Yeah, he doesn't regret too much, and he's a fearless person off the field when it comes to public comments, and that is usually a commendable trait. Now, some of his wounds are self-inflicted, and he can be reckless sometimes with his choice of words, but he is fearless, and I'll give him credit for that. And yeah, this was a case where I actually visited him at the end of my reporting process for a 2-hour fact-checking session, and it was in Malibu at his home, and nice backyard right on the Pacific Ocean. It was a pretty stunning view. And so that was one of the things we talked about. And I said, listen, I can't guarantee this because I wasn't in the room in the press conference in August of 2021 when you said, yeah, I've been immunized, having been asked about your vaccination status. But I feel pretty strongly, if I were a columnist for a Green Bay or Milwaukee outlet, and you had told your truth, which is you were allergic to an ingredient PEG in Pfizer and Moderna, and you were concerned about Johnson & Johnson side effects, and that's why you didn't get vaccinated. As a vaccinated person sitting there, I'm pretty sure I would have found that to be a reasonable position, and I would not have ripped you for it. And as it turned out, and I think he ended up getting so much more criticism in November when he tested positive and it was discovered that he was unvaccinated for misleading the public. I think he would have gotten 25% of the criticism he ultimately got had he just told the truth to begin with. So I said, why didn't you just tell the truth? And that's when he said, that's the one thing, if I could do it again, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, is I wish that had gone differently, because that's the one thing that they, meaning critics, really have against me. And then he later said, if I had to do it again, I would have just said, I'm allergic to PEG, I'm not taking Johnson & Johnson, and I'm not getting vaxxed, and just told the truth. And I give him credit for saying those words and making that admission. And he doesn't usually regret things. I don't remember the last time I heard the words "I'm sorry" come out of his mouth. And he didn't say he was sorry. He wasn't apologizing. I think he was explaining and admitting, hey, yeah, I made a bit of a mistake here, and I'm taking ownership of it. And I do think he deserves some credit for that.
Yeah, no, I went 100%. I think sometimes like self awareness is always it's with these a lot of these star athletes and stuff. Something you always kind of like to see people. Hey, I understand what I said and did, and probably the way it was going to be reacted to. I want to talk a little bit about kind of his on the football side of things, obviously, which is what is obviously super exciting coming up here, and in the middle of August. In terms of making that move to the Jets, I know there's some stuff on 9/11 we can touch on in a minute, but like in terms of making that move to the Jets, did you guys get a chance to talk a little bit about that and just what that move was going to be like? I know Rodgers has obviously talked publicly some about hey going to win a Super Bowl and stuff, but was there anything interesting or that stood out to you in kind of talking about that trade from Green Bay to the Jets?
I think it was more because he had talked a lot about what it meant to him. And I think I always thought it was actually a smart move by him, because he can never get close to Brady in championship rings. It's 7-1. But if he won one for the New York Jets, that would feel like 4 rings. That's how much of an impact I think that would have on his legacy. But his family members, when the trade was made, estranged family members too, they felt like he looked different. He looked like the old Aaron, the Aaron before the estrangement started in 2014, he looked unburdened. He looked lighter on his feet. He looked happy. And I think New York, the love affair between Aaron Rodgers and New York last summer, before the injury, was something in covering sports for almost 40 years. I really don't think I've seen with an acquired superstar athlete from another market coming in. And they really, even when he went out to the US Open and then posted on Instagram a couple of anti vaccination things revolving around Novak Djokovic, and New York being a liberal city, and nobody cared. It seemed like they were willing to give him a pass on that and anything else because the fans were just so grateful that he was here and getting ready to play quarterback for the New York Jets. And and being in that building on 9/11, I can't remember ever being more heartsick for a fan base and an athlete than I was that night. And to have it ripped away, what had been a love affair, a mutual one, after 4 snaps, just it just felt terrible being there and seeing that unfold. So yeah, I'm glad that the Jets and Aaron Rodgers basically have a mulligan this year, and hopefully he'll stay healthy for 14, 15, 16, maybe 17 starts. I'd sign up for 14 right now, but I
Yeah.
want to just see him play a full season and give the Jets a shot to make a run.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page here. I think the 14 plus games for Rodgers and 12 plus for Tyron Smith the Jets would probably be in very good shape if they get anything like the Rodgers and Tyron Smith we've come to know on, from the offensive line and quarterback spots. Did you
And,
get
by-
a
and,
chance to
by, and
talk?
by the way, Will, I
Yeah,
think if Rodgers could give you 14 starts, as long as he's healthy at the end of the year and the injuries in the middle of the year, I would totally take that because I think Tyrod Taylor can win 2 of the other 3.
yeah,
Like
me too.
he's a solid
He's
backup
been really
quarterback.
good in camp. He's
Yeah.
looked more than fine in camp and things like that. Did you get a chance to, from a Rodgers perspective? You obviously mentioned 9/11 and being kind of heartbroken. He's talked a little bit about this. I mean, well, he's talked a lot about, and generally just kind of the injury and things like that. But in terms of the mental side of things, he obviously talked so much about, hey, I was close to being retired in the end of 2022. Then 4 plays in, did it almost kind of re-energize him from a competitive standpoint? Where not that he wasn't like extremely excited to get go into 2023, but it felt like he's 1 year removed from an MVP and he's still at the top of his game. And now it's like people are kind of really writing Rodgers off in a lot of circles. Do you feel like that re energized him a little bit, just being around him of like, hey, this injury is kind of giving me almost new life and a new perspective on how quickly football really could be over for me?
Yeah, I think what it did for him, Will, is it basically transported what last year would have been to this year. So as devastated as he was and talking to people close to him, he had some grim, dark moments in the early stages of recovery and rehab where he wondered if the Jets would even want him back. And he wasn't sure he could make it back. And now he's back and he looks healthy. And the Jets have an even better roster than they had at this point last year. The division seems to be a tad weaker. And so there's an opportunity there for Aaron Rodgers basically to make up for what happened last year. And yeah, I think he is re energized. And listen, the other thing people forget his last year in Green Bay, he did not have a good year. A lot of it was the thumb, but still, he looked like an aging quarterback. Then he gets hurt with the Jets 4 snaps in. He's got an awful lot to prove this year that he's not near the end and that he can play at a high level for another 2 or 3 seasons. It starts, obviously. I can't believe the NFL opened the Jets up in San Francisco. It's like, are you trying to get him hurt again? I understand that the rest of their early schedule is very manageable, if not weak. So they might be 4-1 after 5 games, but starting in San Francisco against that defense on the road, I was just like, wow, I could not believe the league did that. But I think the Jets will be okay.
Yeah, the Aaron Rodgers in San Francisco for a Sunday night or Monday night game feels like we see it over and over again, and we'll see him. They'll talk a million times about how Rodgers was a Niners fan back in the early 2000s before getting drafted and the whole 9 yards. If there was one, I want to ask you one quickly a little bit about the Jets, but in one, was there one or two things that stood out to you most about writing this book in terms of obviously we talked about some of those bigger things that have happened in the last couple of years, but Was there one or two things either there things you weren't expecting, something that you found particularly interesting? Obviously, I'm super excited diving in again. You guys, if you want to order it, you can order it now as a pre-sale, and then it comes out, one on August 20th officially. What was there any one or two things that kind of stood out to you most, or something that was funny that you weren't expecting, or anything like that?
Oh, by the way, Amazon.com would be the best place to get it
Yeah,
right now.
that's the link I have pulled up. I
Yeah,
don't know. I was about to read it off.
that seems to be the easiest place to go. Uh, I think the one thing that would surprise a lot of fans reading it is just how universally loved the guy is by his teammates throughout his entire career. Because the way he's covered in the media, there's a certain perception of him. I think that a lot of people who don't know Aaron Rodgers maybe didn't follow his career in Green Bay that closely, and now are here in New York, that would be surprised that I talked to a prominent NFL official who knows hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of NFL players. And this guy admitted to me, he goes, listen, I can't stand Aaron Rodgers and his positions on things like the vaccine. But I have to admit, I have never met an NFL player who doesn't like him. And I think what the players feel has to count for something because he's spending more time with them than anyone else. And almost to a man throughout his entire career, they rave about him. And so I think that means a lot to him. It should mean a lot to others as they judge him and his character. And so that's one thing that throughout my reporting really stood out. And also, listen, he's done things, a lot of self-inflicted wounds, and he's been reckless at times with his choice of words on TV, and he's had to pay for that, and rightfully so. But he's his acts of generosity and kindness with children that he doesn't publicize. His marketing agent at CAA, Ed Berry, is a down to earth guy. Was a walk on at Kentucky. Calls himself a country boy, and he talks about things that he wants publicity for, good deeds that Aaron Rodgers does, and Rodgers tells him, no, I don't want it. I don't want the publicity. And it frustrates a marketing agent who's trying to build his profile. And over time, Aaron has lost endorsements in part because of his positions. And so there's a lot of good there. And publicly, you see most of the bad. But privately, there's a lot of good that maybe is not out there as much. And I explore that as well in this book. And that's the only way to write a balanced account of human life is basically to give you the good and the bad and everything in between. And I try to let the reader decide whether or not they believe this is a good person or not. I don't want to make that decision for the reader.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things. I remember during COVID, Rogers gave well over $1 million to save small businesses, and I remember I think recently, is a couple of months ago, if I'm not mistaken, when the wildfires and stuff were in California, gave a very large sum of money and like didn't even want it noted, like didn't want any of the publicity for it, just like did it because he wanted to, and it's like that's the stuff sometimes you don't see, and it's nice to always know, kind of behind the scenes what's going on. You mentioned the Jets' expectations this year. I got to ask you one Jets question before before we kind of wrap here. What's a successful season for them? I think we talked about this probably about 12 months ago on this exact podcast, and we kind of batted around the different ideas, and we had no idea what it was going to look like. We still don't really know what it's going to look like, right? We've only seen some joint practices and preseason games. What for you is a successful season? Because again, you mentioned I haven't been in the Super Bowl in forever, but also haven't been in the playoffs, in almost a decade and a half. So what for you, Connor, sitting here in February, like what's a successful season for the New York Jets?
I think making the playoffs, but really what they should talk about is winning the AFC East. Because last year when Rodgers showed up, it was understandable. He talked about the Lombardi Trophy looking lonely from Super Bowl III. That was great stuff. Everyone ate it up. And the talk was almost Super Bowl or bust, which is a really rough proposition. But I don't think they talked enough last year, and even really now this year, about winning the AFC East. The last time the Jets did that, they won the division in a tiebreaker in 2002 at 9-7 with the Patriots. Okay, the last time they won it outright was Bill Parcells was coaching in 1998, I believe. So it's been a long time since they've ruled this division, and I think that should be the goal. And then everything else flows off of that in the postseason. Win your division. And I think Listen, if they don't win the division and make the playoffs at 10-7 or 11-6, that's a successful season to get back. Then, of course, once you're there, I do think they can do some damage in the playoffs if they're healthy. I think Brees Hall is going to have a monster year. I think Brees Hall to Rodgers at this point, if you're old enough to remember this, Terrell Davis to John Elway in Denver at the end of Elway's career. And I think Brees Hall might be the most important person on the offensive unit outside of Aaron, of course, and maybe including Aaron, because he can take so much of the burden off of the quarterback if he's healthy and plays the way I think he's going to play.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think is the unanimous, like him and Bijan Robinson are like who can push Christian McCaffrey for that, best running back in the league. Like Brees, 1,600 total yards last year with Zach Wilson and Trevor Simeon and Tim Boyle playing quarterback. Last thing here, and you referenced something earlier that I found extremely interesting about how Rodgers winning Super Bowl with the Jets, how much it would mean to his legacy. Right now, I think he is in that. There's Brady, and then right a lot. Mahomes is the flavor of the month and flavor of the last 5 or 6 years. And understandably, he's going to be talked about in that Brady because he's got whatever the 3 rings or a couple rings. So how much does Rodgers winning a ring kind of catapult him back into that type of conversation? Just because I think right now he kind of feels like he's more in might be the best quarterback ever to watch and some of the best seasons we've ever seen, but kind of feels like he's more in the Peyton, Elway, Marino, that guys that are right outside the top 2, or maybe it depends on who you talk to. I think Rodgers is too, but I'm very biased. I've loved watching him play. How much would winning a Super Bowl in New York, or another MVP or whatever, mean to his legacy?
I think temporarily on the list, it would put him back at number 2 behind Brady, ahead of Mahomes, who I have at 2 now. And I think Mahomes eventually will hurdle him if that happens. But I think that's really the main reason why he decided to push for a trade to the Jets, because he saw great opportunity. And similar to what Brady did in Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers being the losingest franchise in all of North American sports, Brady goes in there, wins a Super Bowl, which is amazing that he pulled that off in year 1. So I think that's what he's looking to do. And all time right now, with the 4 MVPs, and he does have a Super Bowl MVP. Brett Favre did not win MVP in his Super Bowl victory for the Packers. I'd probably put him 5th behind Brady, Mahomes, Montana, and Peyton Manning. But I would put him ahead of Elway and Marino. So I think he's on that first tier. If you're going with a top 5, I think he's there at 5. But he can move up. And the only way to do that now is to win the whole thing for the Jets.
Yeah, because I think the one difficulty is if he doesn't win it, even won an MVP but didn't win a Super Bowl, people will point to Peyton's 2 rings, Montana's rings, obviously, and that's just the ring culture we're in, in 2024. And obviously appreciate you, mightily, obviously, for coming on. I'm sure you'll be in plenty of stuff coming up here as the book comes out again. Available for pre-order now. Amazon, easiest place to go get it out of the darkness. The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. I know it comes out the 20th, but again, make sure you guys go pre-order that. It's going to be an awesome read. I'm excited for it. Obviously, Ian's work over the years with Belichick and Jeter, Coach K, a bunch of others. There's no shortage of good books in there. Ian, appreciate it. Obviously, as always, I hope the book dominates the dominates the market and wins another bestseller. It would be well deserved.
Oh, thanks so much, Will. It was great to be with you. Hopefully, we'll do it again.